Well, good morning, everybody. Hope you have your cup of coffee. It's time for Waking Up Cerberus. I'm Suzanne Sherman here on the Cerberus Radio Network, where we defend freedom and liberty from the flames of tyranny. Today is February 20th. Wow, this month's flying by. Year of our Lord 2019. Joining me in our cyber studio, we have the founders of the network, Daniel Bailey, Jeff Johnson, who's also running the control panel here. And we have Sander Kinzel, a.k.a. Booger. Greg Junkbond Carpenter seems to be AWOL right now. Hopefully he's got the ability to be with us later on. We're going to hopefully be broadcasting for 2 hours live this morning. We're trying to get more consistent, and it is really showing. I want to thank everybody for reacting and showing up and being here, because they know that we're going to be on the air for you. So we've been saying all the time, consistency. We know you guys want us to be on regularly, and we're really making that effort. And again, thank you for those that have joined our fan page. That's facebook.com/CRN. We have a radio network page, facebook.com/Cerberus Radio Network. We have a web page in the works, so that's really exciting news. Hopefully we'll be getting that up and running in the very near future. Some more talent coming in as well. Can't wait to get that started. We have a SoundCloud page. If you can't listen to us live, you can download our links. Please subscribe. Please share. When you see our links on social media, either Facebook or Twitter, please share. We're trying to boost pages and get our word out there a little bit. It's an uphill battle, folks. The market's really saturated with internet talk radio, as well as people just saying, well, I've already paid for Sirius, or I already have my satellite TV and I'll just get my news from there. But, you know, we're going to tell you stuff here that you don't hear on those other outlets. And we're really trying to change your way of thinking. If you think that just getting back to the Constitution or just getting your party of favor elected, and that's going to make a change in fixing Washington, D.C., we've got some news for you. You might not like to hear it, but I guarantee you'll feel better knowing that there are some other solutions. And I want to welcome Junkbond to the show. How are you today, sir?
I am all snowified. I got to tell you, we got snow and ice out here in the People's Democratic Republic of Northern Virginia, and I still have to let the dogs back in, so I'm going to pop off for a second here. I just want to let everybody know I'm here. We're going to have an awesome discussion today. But I have to let the dogs in. Otherwise, I will be strung out by the wife.
Shoveling? Seriously? What did you get, like an inch?
No, it's all ice. We got about a half-inch thick of ice, solid ice.
Okay. Well, I just figured, Virginia, you guys stop on a quarter-inch of snow.
We stop before there's snow, as a matter of fact. Yeah, we stop before there's snow. We don't even wait till there's snow, and we call red code for school, or whatever that's called, where everything's shut down right now. This is pretty exciting. No legislation today, folks.
Oh, that's always a good thing. We should do traffic as well, like the real stations do. Weather and traffic together every 10 minutes. I'll tell you right now, on my roads, I have ice, mule deer, and turkey. That's my traffic report.
I'll have trains.
My roads up here.
Yeah, trains. Hey, Daniel, how are you? Now, you've been trucking all night. How are the roads up where you are?
The roads in Ontario here are dry. Remarkably dry.
Well, I'm still stuck on my property. I tried to get my truck. I got it up my driveway. I have a long curved driveway going uphill. And unfortunately, it has a northern exposure, so the ice and snow is not melting. So I've been trying to dig myself out. Last Thursday, we had a Caterpillar tractor come out with a snowblower. That cleared me out, and we got more snow after that. Tried to get my truck out of the driveway Monday, just slid back into a snowbank, dug it out, backed it into another one. And so I decided to stay home. Yesterday, I was doing a little bit of plowing, trying to feel ambitious and get myself out of here a little bit. And don't disregard that half an inch of ice, because I tell you, I had a half an inch of ice getting into our garage, and I fell hard. The good news is, if I had any osteoporosis, I would have known. I would have shattered both wrists and probably my tailbone, even though notwithstanding the ample insulation I had protecting it in the fall. That being said, I am about sick and tired of winter, and this Honduras thing we were talking about with no winter is starting to sound really good right about now. Booger, we had a great talk yesterday about the involvement of the United States government and the creation of some of the narcos down in the south of the border area, Latin America, Central America. Why don't we expound upon that? And then we'll, that way anybody following up from one show to the other, we can just jump right into it and then get into our other topics a little bit later on. Does that sound good, everybody?
Sounds good to me.
On my end.
All right.
I'm good.
Sort of run. Go
Okay.
with it.
Okay, got it. Now, before we actually get into the little more detail in Law 1008 in Bolivia that we shoved down their throats, before I was down there working Bolivia, I was working the war against Cali, 1994 in Colombia. And as I covered yesterday, we pretty well knew where these guys were all the time. Got a hold of a buddy of mine last night that was working the exact same mission, but he was in a different organization. And he said, yes, absolutely. He said there were times we knew where they were all at and even together. We would give the order, because he was working a different part of the program, for you guys to move. And we would always get the word, well, they don't have their lawyer with them yet.
And who's they? We knew where they were. Who are you talking about? They. Let's start from
the narcos.
Okay.
Basically, the whole Cali drug cartel. Okay, that's who we're specifically talking about on this one, the Cali drug cartel. They were together in meetings, and there may have been one or two stragglers out, but you've got to look. You grab 80% of the command and control of an organization in a roundup, you pretty well neutralize that entire organization. You may not wipe it out, but you're going to neutralize it.
Unless, of course, the United States government.
We're going to get into.
Hey, Booger.
Go ahead.
Unless, of course, it's the U.S. government, and in which case, you've just caught a piece of the pig. You can still make bacon with the rest.
Yes, and it's like when we were down there on this mission, I'm like, hey, I want to make sure that I'm covering the capabilities of this TRW machine that we captured when we were down there. And he's like, oh yeah, I remember it well. And he said that was his moment of we're not when it hit him, the epiphany of we're not here to win this thing. It is not being talked about, and it is being killed. We accidentally captured a very, very state-of-the-art van-mounted listening device. And this particular device, this was 1994, could pull up outside of alongside any of your telephone lines, listen in on every conversation going down that line, and nobody knew they were being listened to. There were no indicators at all. This particular device only.
Hey, Booger,
Hey,
Booger, it was all a passive collection thing?
Yes, that is what, and they were actually when we got in and analyzed the information, what their procedures were, why they had this, what were they doing with it. They were not very concerned about us. They were listening to their own people. Because that's where they considered the threat. Who in our organization is talking about what? So that was also interesting. They're just worried about their own people. They consider us controlled opposition already. They were worried about their own people. Now, this device at that time period, only 4 of them had ever been manufactured. And guess what? This one was sold to Israel. That's very interesting.
That's not a coincidence and a half. I'll tell you, when I was in Iraq, we did something with vans we took, and we did what we called mobile GPSing. We took 3 different vehicles, and we installed Doppler type capabilities on them, and we were able to GPS the specific location of a vehicle so they could call in fire on it. And guess where that's sold? Israel.
Yeah. Yeah. And whenever this, we first off, all the indicators that we were not there to win, it was just so obvious. You had to be one of those blind patriots that just thought there's no way our government could ever be involved in anything shady to even begin to believe it. And the entire drug war when I was there should have been called the drug war circus. I mean, if you should have had the Barnum and Bailey's circus music playing the entire time. It was actually sickening to be in some of the meetings. I mean, it's like somebody should be announcing live under the big top, the drug war circus with your favorite alphabet agencies and advisors in tow. Yeah. And so by the time I ended up getting to, another thing, no reports. I could not find a single report made on the capture of that TRW machine ever. Probably it exists somewhere really, really tucked away, but we could not find any existence of it in any of our message traffic. I found that very interesting also.
I've never seen it either.
No, but I confirmed, I knew that we captured one. I just wanted to reconfirm with a friend of mine who entirely different unit, spoke drug war, but receiving their information from different angles during the drug war. And he was like, oh, yeah, well, I remember that well. And so when you take that into consideration, when you end up into a drug war with the injustices that I witnessed in Bolivia, you do not have that motivation to go out and grab people and throw them in prison for hyped up stuff, as you can imagine. And yesterday it was, I didn't want to get too much into Law 1008 without doing further research on it. I knew, like, for example, I brought up Article 74 yesterday that was resulting in women giving birth to children in the prisons because, according to Article 74, you could not be released out of that prison, even emergency. I want you to just look at that, the magnitude of that. And as I got digging in it last night, I found Article 121, which is what I knew that the process was insane for these people, if charged.
Can we back up?
Finally get free. Go ahead.
What is the source of Article 74, 1008? I mean, whose laws are these?
These are Bolivia's laws. That it was actually in July, I do believe, of 1988. The U.S. forced these laws down Bolivia's throat. And how we do this, I've been there, I've witnessed it. We tie it to force these people to do insanely immoral things. Yes,
that's how we keep them. Yeah, that's how we keep them at bay. That's how we maintain control over their governments and keep them from organizing in a way that they would become an economic power in this hemisphere. We've done it ever since, since the Monroe Doctrine. There really hasn't been an abatement of our bad behavior. Look at how many times we went and we taunted Mexico, and how about the spot resolution, right? Where we stole land from them because we instigated a war. How many times have we instigated wars in these Latin American countries? It's a nonstop effort on our part, Booger, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And it's we get into their agriculture, everything. For example, in Nicaragua, I believe it was Roundup, to do with either Roundup or genetically modified grain. That Nicaragua said, we're not going to allow this into our country. And what did we do? We withheld aid till they let the Monsanto's products back in. Interesting, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah. But one of
that's not the last. That's not
brother.
The first time. I mean, when we took and we're, pardon me, we're taking the genetically modified corn. right? And we're turning that into fuel for vehicles, and now we're not able to export corn down there, so we're supplementing other products that are not really native to their culture. People aren't eating them. This is not the first time we've manipulated with overseas markets before like this. Uh, I I I find nothing outrageous here, nothing we should be upset about. I think we should just continue to uh, conduct spying operations and economic manipulation, and I think we should just continue to buy off Latin American leaders like we've been doing. I think this works perfectly. Suzanne, isn't this how they do it in the legal field?
Well, I was thinking this is exactly what our government does with regards to the states. We have this, I think our good friend Rick Barrett, when he was taking his course on Homeland Security, his instructor, one of his instructors said, we have what we call the new federalism, where we control what the states were originally intended to have within their own providence of their powers, and we will manipulate and control what they do with grants and federal funding. And there's just this assumption that these funds magically appear in the federal coffers. Well, where do they come from? Well, they come from the individuals, and the states send them to them. So this is why I always say the states need to stop sending money to the feds. We had an incident out here in Utah where a school district actually said, we want to have a better education for the children. Accordingly, now in that pursuit, we're going to abandon Common Core. Well, when it became apparent that they were not going to be getting federal funding if they abandoned Common Core, a federally implemented program, they're going to lose their money. And they said, whoa, back up the truck. Well, we have to keep it because the children, the education of the children, it's always the children and their education is our most important concern. Well, how do you explain the fact that you said getting out of Common Core was your primary motivation? Getting out of Common Core was a means by which you would get the children's education improved. But now when you're not getting the money, that's no longer an issue. So is the money more important or the education? And I submit to you, it is absolutely the former.
Yeah, it seems to be how this government controls not only the governments from overseas, the people from overseas, but the people within. We're all controlled by this spigot of money that comes from Washington D.C. I think it's like basically a big logistics warehouse that pumps money out all over the world to control everything that moves on this planet, including economies.
The other day when I went through the list of I think 38 or 37 or 38 national emergencies that we have currently underway, that we're living under, you would think that we would be in a state of chaos with all these national emergencies going on. Oh, wait, they're in Sudan.
I laugh at you. That's a wholehearted laugh right there, because once you raise the bar, and I liken it, and I liken the plethora of emergencies to cybersecurity. In cybersecurity, years ago, back in the 90s, we would have a situation if you had the inkling of one virus on your network, the network was shut down, that virus was hunted out, destroyed, shoot it right off the network. Now, and over time, I should say, as viruses became more prevalent and different types of technologically advanced malware was introduced into networks, it became more of a deal with it mitigation risk model. So it was more of a risk tolerance. How many viruses could you handle on your network? And now we've gotten to the point where we're living with dozens and dozens of computer viruses and people on our computers. Like my phone, I like to joke about it, but it's not a joke. I want you to understand that I know that the GRU is on my phone. I know that the fourth PLA is on my phone. I know that NSA is probably on my phone. I can't say for sure. Oh gosh, I did it again. Because I was an employee of the NSA, I have to say that everything I'm talking about here is of my own conjecture and nothing regarding anything I learned at the NSA or any policies that are in use at the NSA now or in the past. So I guess that NSA is probably collecting stuff on my phone to collect stuff, their messages that they'll collect the stuff that the Russians and Chinese are doing on my phone. I would not doubt that the British MI guys are on my phone, as well as, maybe a half dozen other people. Plus, how many people are in and reading your email? You realize that every intelligence service around the world has access and has a database of your emails. This is not something that's private. So I tell people all the time, use a service like Wire, use a service like Signal, something that's going to cut out most of the low-level governments and all of the run-of-the-mill hackers, per se. That's going to keep them from getting your stuff. At least not everybody will have it. That's the way you have to look at it. It's like, do you want everybody to have it? So in the same way, the DC manipulation has become so overwhelming. It's how much can you tolerate anymore? It's not how badly are they going to manipulate people. It's how much can we tolerate them manipulating people all over the world.
And at what cost to us? How much money would we save if we did not expend these funds on changing the social policies and cultural mores of other societies around the world?
How many trillions was it in Iraq already?
Yeah, and look what we've gotten. And, I'm sorry, but every time I see these articles about somebody or a picture of a fallen soldier mourn for his family, he died in Afghanistan, and somebody had commented, and for what good? Oh, there's not the time or place to say such things. Well, when is the appropriate time or place? Rather than saying we mourn those that have lost, how about we have the conversation that maybe we stop using these great people as fodder for non-defensive wars? I mean, you guys are both veterans. Is there anything going on over there that impacts me directly?
I can't think of anything.
No, I really can't. Other than our lust for the supposed billions in gems and fossil fuels that are in Afghanistan.
No.
And we need to keep that opioid. The opioids coming.
Well, the opioids another thing. If you want to keep covert funding, and you want to keep people on a certain level of drugs and manipulated in certain situations, I'm not going to get too specific about that, but there's a reason why the CIA maintains and keeps the open throttle in the opium fields, just like we did to the back in the opium wars. We put it like that. There's a reason why we kept the masses of China subdued on opium. And we happen to be, and when I say we, I mean us and the British and a few other countries, happen to rape the land and steal anything of value from them while they were all stoned. Yeah, that's a good high moral thing for us to do.
Well, I had mentioned that once before about the United States military forces guarding poppy fields, for instance, in Afghanistan. And I was excoriated by somebody that had been there. And he said, I never saw that the whole time I was there. Well, I don't know how somebody that had been there could see Afghanistan's a pretty big place, could see everything going on. And what's wrong with saying, if we are there and we're doing that, what's wrong with being honest about it? It makes no sense to me. But here's, he
might not have seen. Well, he might not have seen it, Suzanne. That's the thing is, the people that are guarding it aren't the people that are seeing what's really happening. For example, I was sent out to China Lake back in the mid '90s to go guard, quote, against narcos landing planes there. And as Booger can tell you, probably. No, the reason I was there is I was guarding narcos so they could land planes, but I didn't know that at the time. I was there guarding the field so that nobody would run in on the CIA's drug running activities. That's why they had me out there. So over in Afghanistan, the intelligence community isn't going to show Billy Bob Major or Billy Bob Sergeant what the heck's really going on. They're never going to see that part of it. You're going to be the useful idiot.
I was actually watching, it was a campaign video for a veteran running for public office, and it really bugs me that I didn't save it. But one of the activities he actually put on his little resume and a video said he guarded poppy fields in Afghanistan. I'm thinking, is this a hoax or is he serious? And it was a serious campaign ad. He was actually admitting that they did it.
Wow.
And he was proud of it. And I had no reason to believe it was fake or satirical, but maybe he did think that was worthy. I came across an article that I wanted to share because this is really related to what we're discussing about how the U.S. is going to influence others. And here we have, I suppose it's good to be king and the leader of the free world and impose our values on others. And again, what other sovereign nations look towards and how they look at other contingencies of the population, in this case, homosexuals and practicing homosexuality, is really not the United States government's concern, or so I thought. But an article out of Breitbart here says that Trump is going to launch a worldwide fight to decriminalize homosexuality. I think I would rather see him, focus on issues here at home. Yes, this is in Breitbart. He's going to launch a worldwide fight to decriminalize homosexuality. Meanwhile, here we've done nothing about decriminalizing plants. The Trump administration will launch an effort to decriminalize homosexuality in countries where it is still illegal as part of a diplomatic push for LGBTQ LMNOP rights and an effort to isolate Iran, which persecutes homosexuals. So I don't think this is really about the LGBTQ LMNOP contingency as it is another excuse to poke Iran. But,
we used to be friends with Iran, back 80, 100 years ago. We had this open relationship. We traded with them. We talked to them. After World War I, the countries of the Middle East were asked who they wanted to deal with. Everybody wanted to work with these United States. Everybody. They all loved us. And now we've turned it into a situation because we have manipulated the leadership in Iran for our, quote, our own interests, our own national security interests. Everybody in Iran can't stand us. Thank you, Kermit Roosevelt and the CIA. You've done another doozy for us. And it's the same thing for Mexico. You think about that, how much manipulation we've had at the leadership level in Mexico for years. We've overturned more governments in Mexico than a McDonald's employee overturns eggs in the morning when they're making breakfast down on Broadway in New York City. We have completely destroyed that. We even had influence back into the 1860s, 1850s, when they had a Habsburg come out. That was part of our manipulation to get a Habsburg out. Maximilian, can't think of his last name, but he was one of the Habsburgs. And they brought him out to be the president of Mexico. He ended up getting shot in a couple of years, but because that didn't work out. But yeah, that's why Russia's in Mexico all the time. That's why the whole Cold War thing about Mexico was, and Cuba was because the Russians would meet people down there. And it was because we kept it as a third world nation. So they were looking for other countries to help them. And if it wasn't going to be us, it's going to be the Russians. So we do this stuff to ourselves. So everything we've done seems to come back and bite us real hard.
And we never seem to learn. I'm going to continue with this article briefly. NBC News
Sorry.
reported, no, that's great insight. We got 2 hours. NBC had reported on Tuesday that the effort is to be led by the United States ambassador to Germany, a staunch Trump supporter who is among the highest ranking openly gay officials ever to serve in the U.S. government. Here's what I don't understand is why do we have to, why is our sexual identity and what we do have to be a part of our resume? Well, we have a lesbian mayor in Salt Lake City. Well, what if somebody's straight? Well, we have a straight. No, that's hate speech. You can't say you're straight. This whole thing is so stupid.
I was looking for any type of ratification debate discussions on LGBT rights, and I was not able to find any. I'm thinking that it wasn't so important to the founders.
No. And so
Yeah.
this guy's apparently going to be one of the front runners to succeed Nikki Haley as the UN ambassador.
Oh, yay.
U.S. ambassador to Germany, Richard Grenell, the highest profile openly gay person in the Trump administration, is leading the effort, which kicks off Tuesday evening in Berlin. The U.S. embassy is flying in LGBT activists from across Europe for a strategy dinner to plan to push for decriminalization in places that still outlaw homosexuality, mostly concentrated in the Middle East, Africa, and the Caribbean. Why isn't this a United Nations effort? With all this throwing gays off of buildings, why has the UN never stepped in to say, hey, we need to stop this? Although
I'll bring that. I'm going to bring that up. I'll be at a UN event in Indonesia and Malaysia over the next couple of weeks or so, and I'll be sure to bring that up to the leadership in my presentation to the UN. I'll see if I can get them to answer that policy issue. It's obviously a policy issue. Not oh dear God. But if I get a response out of them, I promise you I will take out a telegraph and Morse code that back to you as soon as possible from wherever I'm going to be it Papua New Guinea or whatever.
Apparently there's 7
give this.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. To give this thing a few years, a funny thing on the side is the shocking news is going to be someone is a closet heterosexual. That's going to be the big shocking news.
And people, I'm surprised people aren't right now. I'm surprised people aren't giving grants to help explore their sexuality.
Yeah, it's going to be a Fox News alert. So and so has been confirmed to be a closet heterosexual. And it's give it a few more years.
Apparently, there are 72 countries that criminalize homosexuality. 8 apply the death penalty. 1 is our good old moderate ally, Saudi Arabia. According to a report by a gay rights organization, the Trump administration has been criticized by the LGBTQ community. By the way, bisexual, does that imply that there are 2 genders? Is that not, how does, anyway?
No, that's talking about streetwalkers and stuff.
Oh, okay.
B-U-Y, sexual.
Oh, bi, like 2 feet, bi, okay, anyway.
Bipedal, bisexual, I don't know.
Activists in the U.S. for barring transgender volunteers from serving in the U.S. military and rescinding a policy from the previous administration encouraging sexual accommodation for transgender students in public schools. Okay, now we all saw that video of that monstrosity in that hot pink shirt and high heels throwing stuff around a little convenience store, demanding to be called ma'am. And apparently this man, the reporting agencies even were referring to this thing as a woman.
Yeah,
this is not a woman. That's an insult. I am insulted by that. I'm not offended.
Okay. You ready? You ready for our first breaking news?
What?
You can do. Where's the breaking news music, Jeff? And now a news bulletin from the Cerberus Radio Network. Here we go. From the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism, just released. I got this through one of the colleges I work for in their libraries. And this is published from the Endocrine Society, and it will be published, excuse me, in 3 days. And here it is: a genetic link between gender dysphoria and sex hormone signaling. And what that means in the big breakdown of scientific stuff is that there is a way in which sex hormones signal, in which or how genes express themselves with people who are, quote, transgender or have a dysphoric gender identity, meaning they're a man and believe they're a woman. Well, now they figured out, and they'll be publishing this in a couple days, that people who are transgender have an inappropriate expression of genes. Now that in conjunction with another study that just came out from the Journal of Psychoneuroendocrinology. There's a mouthful for you, right? The title of this one is Molecular Basis of Gender Dysphoria, Androgen and Estrogen Receptor Interaction. And what this one says is that there is polymorphism or variants or different types in sex steroid receptors. So we have a situation, and there's a third article that I can pull up here in a minute or two that talks about the overuse of antibiotics and the manipulation of androgen and estrogen receptors in children. Basically, the overuse of antibiotics, it's being researched right now. Antibiotic excessive use. We've talked about this before, and other news agencies have talked about this for years, that we're using way too many antibiotics for everything and anything. Parents want it, so doctors are prescribing it. Otherwise, they're going to go somewhere else, and doctors will lose business, blah, blah, blah. This is something we're doing to ourselves. We're giving too many antibiotics, which has a molecular manipulation of estrogen and androgen receptors, which are related to sexual growth, that manipulates who we believe we are. It is completely screwing up the genetic understanding in our body, or the genetic expression in our body of who we understand ourselves to be. These kids are all screwed up in the head, and the doctors are standing up there saying, oh yeah, just go ahead and lop that thing off below his waist there. She's not going to need that being a girl anymore. Take those breasts right off. Just take them right off. When she's a guy, she's not going to need that. That's just going to be in the way. That is child abuse.
You know, Greg, on this, it's amazing that how much your medical rights are now depending on. Give you an example on the testosterone. I went to the gym with was in disagreement with his doctor on the amount of testosterone that they were giving him. And he's like, look, all my research is saying this. And the lady told him, you know, you're correct. But the FDA and your insurance, why the insurance is in there practicing medicine, I don't know, will not approve that. I agree with you. But is the funny thing, she said, there is a lady coming in here that is wanting to change genders. And if I do not write her the maximum amount of testosterone, or what you're getting, I'm going to probably get in a lawsuit on discrimination. I want you to look at that.
Yep. See,
yes.
Now that's something that, you know, being a public health doctor, that's outside of my control, but that's inside my purview of things that I would be studying in the future. I mean, that is completely outrageous that we pander to different groups like this in medical treatment, and we're not even assigning the right treatment to people. Think about it. This lady who thinks she wants to be a guy really needs to have some blood test run to see if she does have uh, any type of what would you call it, uh, morphed gene expression that would make her think she wants to be a guy. First of all, figure out if there is something that's happening physiologically with the person before you just start pumping a bunch of drugs into them. It's hard to discuss something or make someone who has a certain amount of uh, proteins and enzymes interacting in their body where they believe what they're saying is right. It's hard to get them to understand that no, it might be something that's psychologically wrong with you, even though you sense and you feel everything going a different way. That may not be the case. It might just be a chemical imbalance in your body. It might just be the way the genes are expressing themselves. It might just be that the proteins are not synthesizing correctly that makes you think that you want to be a guy. Instead of pumping all these drugs into people, let's take the time and figure out what the hell's going on with them first before we make changes that, like an entropic reaction, right? You take an egg, you drop it on a skillet, you fry it. Well, entropy says you can't turn that back into an egg with a yolk and the white, right? You can't take these people back and make them what they were before in the way that they were before. It just can't happen. We're not there technologically, and I don't think that we should be taking that step to do those things until you've ruled out every possible thing else before you start cutting on an 8-year-old and saying that the 8-year-old's rights to be transgender are more important than the parents' rights to stop some doctor from mutilating their child.
We also, and what we're seeing is parents just jumping on this, excuse me, on this bandwagon. If the
It's a
kid
fad, yeah.
maybe just has a little question, or maybe if a little boy looks at a doll or something like that, and then the parents, oh my gosh, we got to suppress their hormones so they can decide what they are. And the parents are really, just like kids that are afraid of dogs, oftentimes the parents are afraid of dogs. The parents are interjecting these values into their children, and it's being also glorified in the schools. But going back to the use of U.S. influence in foreign countries, for instance, on homosexuality, does bring us back. By the way, I was given a reminder. How did we get to the LGBT when we're talking about the drug war? Because the common thread here is the use of funds to have foreign influence according to what our values should be. So our tax dollars are going to be spent when a small minority of our population seeks to impose their will on the rest of the world, and we get to pay for this. We get to pay for abortion. We get to pay for what's going on in Latin America, by the way, with these drug wars. I want also to have Booger expound upon, the absolute abandonment of due process and what we have here, double jeopardy, the prohibition against double jeopardy. What you told me about the legal process down there and what was imposed upon the Bolivians, to me, was absolutely mind-boggling. I'm going to let you run with that for a moment.
He has a train coming.
I think it's.
I want to jump in here real quick anyway. I want to share we have a listener comment. I just want to share it before we move on, just so that our listeners know that if you make a comment, that's going to get on air. And I'm not going to give a name. I can personally testify to the discrimination against men when it comes to testosterone prescriptions. The hoops that my doctor and I have to go through to get a prescription is filled is ridiculous. So there is a lot of discrimination out there. If you're going there for some whatever personal reason to change your sex, you're going to get it, and men that need it aren't going to get it because they aren't going to allow us. It's just, there you go.
Wow.
That's a good comment. I think I'm going to drag one of my friends. He's internal medicine and an allergist. And we had a discussion the other day. We were at a Scotch tasting event. I'll call it an event because there was 12 scotches to taste in only 2 hours. So there was a challenge there also. And had a plethora of very good 22, 27, and 35-year-old scotches. Jeff, I'm picking up a bottle. So next time you stop by, don't be shy. But he and I were discussing the insanity of the medical patient interaction process. He says, I can't spend more than 10 minutes with any of my patients anymore. The only way that you find out what's really going on is to spend more time with them and speak to them. And I said, yeah, I agree. He said, but if I make one mistake inside of my notes and I send that in, I get hit with a $10,000 fine from CMS, the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services, a division of the Helpless Human Health and Human Services. Pardon me. $10,000 for making one mistake. Now, what type of business, because they consider anything that is incorrect essentially fraud, as opposed to a mistake. I'm going to have him come in one day. We're going to talk about medical billing and how this all works and why you don't see your physician as much as you'd really like to on a future show. But go ahead, continue on, please.
Go ahead, Booger.
Okay, yes, back. Had to mute for a situation. Okay, yeah, going in. And before we actually got into this, I wanted to make sure I am getting behind what I, because if I did not get that, people would say, well, that was your perception. And this is the one like you were talking about. We don't allow double jeopardy here. Well, in Bolivia, under the U.S. pushed law 1008, Article 121 is mandatory triple jeopardy. Mandatory. Okay. If you are charged with a violation of drug 1000 and you're like triple jeopardy, well, first off, you don't get bail and you are guilty until proven innocent. Let's say you're on the bus, which situations like this are referenced in case studies. If you don't believe me, you can get on the internet and find the case studies. Everybody on the bus being arrested. If they want to hold you, which can end up being 3 to 5 years, they can do it. To get out just by being on a bus that cocaine was found in. To get out, you have to be proven 3 times. The process is, hey, if you are acquitted in the court the first time, it's a mandatory appeal for the prosecution to appeal it to Superior Court. Now, let's say, and it generally takes a year from the day you're arrested to the day you end up going to trial. Now, it's going to be another year to get to Superior Court, proven not guilty in Superior Court. Now you go to the Supreme Court, which is going to be another year. And the insane penalties, the maximum penalty in Bolivia for homicide is 10 years. The minimum penalty for a violation of law 1008 is 10 years, maximum 25. But they've got people being sentenced to over 85 years in prison for simply having sulfuric acid in their vehicle. And also on it, lime and cement contains lime. If they want to try to fix it, where, hey, we're going to say these bags of cement weren't really to put blocks to make a new wall in his house, it was to use the lime in it to process the cocaine, then you can be thrown in jail for that. And absolutely absurd that actually, there's actually an article in there that actually empowers the police to have what they call, let me see, where was it actually like pre-constructed evidence. It's absolutely absurd.
So how do you survive something like this? It seems like you're locked up in the judicial system forever.
Isn't that how they turn them into narcos? Because these people have lost their way of earning a living, so it's just easier to turn over and
Yes,
the United States government, right? Just keep them so they have no other way to make feed their families.
let's
Jeez.
face it. If you are out there and you get grabbed for this, and one guy, they said proof that he was guilty was that he ran. Okay, the guy was a taxi driver. The police were in civilian clothes, whatever they raided him. He thought they were trying to rob him. And he ran. And let me tell you what, perfect example, Salvador, during the war, we were not required to stop for any police because so many of the guerrillas were dressing up like police to conduct their business. So hey, we were allowed to run from police, even in uniform. Why wouldn't it be logical that someone down there, when they have a bunch of people in civilian clothes with guns coming down on them, would take off running? But yet, and this guy actually ended up going to prison, okay? Because third attempt to prove his innocence, he ended up getting found guilty. And the whole proof, they were saying, was that he was running. Isn't that incredible?
Why don't we?
Yeah.
We're gonna take a break in about 10 minutes here and split the show up into 2 hours for SoundCloud. I thought we would get into a little bit about how this whole drug war had started, and I had found an article from medicaljane.com. And Junk Bond, you were very much familiar with a lot of the facts behind the story. I'll start getting into it and I'll let you expound upon this. But the headline it says exposed the full story behind why marijuana is illegal and classified as a Schedule I drug. And I remember when we heard that was classified as a Schedule I drug, you had commented that somebody paid a lot of money for this. You know, I grew up, and as we all did, with marijuana being considered illegal. And as when I was in college, I could see it starting to gain more acceptance and tolerance in California. In fact, depending on where you were, I was on Venice Beach, and there were a couple guys smoking it, sitting on the curb out there, and a cop just laughed and said, "You can't do that right in front of me. Put that out." But nothing else happened. I think even then they were recognizing that it was pretty ridiculous to put people in cages over that. So I do tip my hat to California for again, making it legal for even recreational use. But I digress. Let me go to this article here. A team got together and discussed censorship of medical marijuana knowledge. Despite multitude studies supporting the medicinal benefits of cannabis, not much is changing, and the plant remains illegal. Well, as we know right now, 33 states and Washington, D.C. have legalized it in one form or another. Even conservative Utah has a very limited but medicinal marijuana law that is now in effect. To help us understand why the news isn't getting covered, let's go to the story about the prohibition of cannabis. And again, not many people, I don't know of anybody that really understood all this, but the story behind it, they talk about Henry Ford. Do you want to run with that, or do you want me to explain a little bit more about Henry Ford and Andrew Mellon, even, jump on?
You can start with them. I'm going to listen at first because I think this is just some of the most amazing bits of American history that most people have no idea with. You going to talk about Reefer Madness too?
Yeah, this is, I mean, I never would have connected Henry Ford, Andrew Mellon, William Randolph Hearst with marijuana prohibition. But Henry Ford in 1913 opened his automobile assembly line to produce the Model T. In the 1930s, he opened a plant in Michigan where he successfully experimented with biomass fuel conversion, proving that hemp could be used as an alternative to fossil fuels. I think it's easy to see where we're going with this. They extracted methanol, charcoal fuel, tar pitch, ethyl acetate, and creosote, all from hemp. What this meant for Ford was that now he could not only produce their own raw materials to make cars, but he could also make the fuel to run them as well. The discovery was horrible news for a man by the name of Andrew Mellon, who owned much of, get ready, Gulf Oil Corporation. Andrew Mellon was the Secretary of Treasury under President Herbert Hoover. What did John Taylor of Caroline prognosticate? Beware the unholy alliance of government and finance. There you have it right here. Owner of the sixth largest bank at the time, the Mellon Bank. His bank was the primary financial support of a petrochemical company by the name of DuPont. DuPont was developing and patenting many different forms of synthetics from fossil fuels, including synthetic rubber, plastic rayon, and a paint that GM used to coat their cars. However, Mellon Bank was most heavily invested in DuPont's sulfur-based process of turning wood fiber into usable paper. In 1916, Mellon's investment began to look like a money pit with the U.S. Department of Agriculture chief scientist processed paper from hemp pulp and concluded that paper from hemp was favorable in comparison with those made from wood pulp. The paper produced by hemp fibers did not yellow over time, unlike the chemical-drenched paper that was being produced. In addition, an acre of hemp produces more paper than an acre of regular trees. Strangely enough, the actual production of hemp fiber in the U.S. continued to decline until 1933 to around 500 tons per year. This is no coincidence. Enter, in the 1930s, a man by the name of William Randolph Hearst, invested heavily in thousands of acres of timberland to make wood pulp for the newspaper industry. He was the owner of the largest newspaper company that was read by more than 20 million United States citizens in 18 key cities, arguably one of the most powerful men in American history. Since he didn't want any competition from the high-quality hemp paper, he had to do something. He soon teamed up with DuPont, who was providing Hearst with the chemicals he used to preserve his papers at the time. Together, they would take hemp completely off the market. The DuPont Corporation was persistently lobbying in Washington, D.C., while Hearst began a racist smear campaign in his newspapers. One quote, "Marijuana influences Negroes to look at white people in the eye, step on white men's shadows, and look at white women twice." Hearst newspaper was a fuel to the fire to the prohibition of marijuana. He painted cannabis as an extremely dangerous drug in his yellow journalism and convinced millions of Americans, many of them congressmen, that the harmless plant is, in fact, evil. Films like Reefer Madness had the public blaming cannabis for everything from car accidents to death. Isn't this, it seems to me that people that have their own self-interest in mind seem to always have an exaggerated influence on our politicians. And you really think your vote matters. You want to run with this, Greg, for a little bit?
Yeah, I sure do. I'm going to get into a little bit more about the positive hemp, because not only did he find an answer through biofuels with hemp, he also made a car out of hemp.
You know what we'll do is first we're going to take a break so that way Jeff can answer this. So what we've done so far in the first hour is talk about our influence in the drug wars in Central and Latin America, as well as our expanding influence on the social and cultural mores of other sovereign nations around this globe. And we come back, we're going to expound upon the creation of reefer madness, which has ultimately led to the criminalization of countless American citizens. This is the Cerberus Radio Network, where we're defending liberty and freedom from the flames of tyranny. We'll be right back.
Cerberus Radio Network, protecting liberty and freedom from the flames of tyranny.
All right, everybody, welcome back to Hour 2 of Waking Up Cerberus. I'm Suzanne Sherman.
Robert E. Lee, commanding all Virginia forces.
Oops.
On April 15th of this year of our Lord, 1861, Simon Cameron, the Secretary of War of the United States, sent a telegram to our Governor, John Letcher, directing him to raise 3 regiments of infantry to be sent to assist in suppressing the Southern Confederacy. Governor Letcher's answer is well known to you, but perhaps not his words. His wire to Washington stated, "You have chosen to inaugurate civil war. And having done so, we will meet you in a spirit as determined as the Lincoln administration has exhibited toward the South." 2 days later, the Virginia legislature voted for secession. Just as we would not send any of our soldiers to march in other states and tyrannize other people, so will we never allow the armies of others to march into our state and tyrannize our people. Like many of you, indeed most of you, I've always been a Union man. It is not with joy or with a light heart that many of us have welcomed secession. Had our neighbors to the north practiced a less bellicose form of persuasion, perhaps this day might not have come, but that day has been thrust upon us, like it was thrust upon our ancestors. The Lincoln administration required us to raise 3 regiments. Tell them we have done so.
Cerberus Radio Network, protecting liberty and freedom from the flames of tyranny.
All right, everybody, welcome back. This is Hour 2 of Waking Up Cerberus. It is February 20th, year of our Lord 2019. Greg Junkbon Carpenter joins me in the studio, as does our correspondent Booger and Jeff Johnson. Daniel Bailey had been up all night, so he was with us for the first hour listening in and has retired. So want to continue this conversation. We were talking about the creation of reefer madness and the financial incentives that went into the criminalization of not only cannabis but hemp. And Greg was in the middle of getting into that. Greg, why don't we turn this over to you and you continue your commentary in the second hour?
I'm so excited to hear what I have to say. So basically, hemp was made illegal. The name marijuana was assigned to it. Part of what Hearst had done was took it and made it a race issue, that the crazy Mexicans were bringing it to the blacks and making them completely uncontrollable, blah, blah, blah. There was a whole, I mean, there's tons of information out there that you can look to and read about the mischaracterization of cannabis. But the benefits of cannabis outweigh the drawbacks and the propaganda of how bad it really is a million times over. As far back as the early teens, Henry Ford, as Suzanne mentioned last hour, had identified how to make a biofuel out of hemp. And by 1941, he had made up a hemp vehicle. The panels of the car body were made out of hemp, and they could withstand impact 10 times stronger than steel. Now, an analysis was done uh, at the time of the prototype's release by Popular Mechanics, and the strength of the hemp derived plastics used to build the car were incredibly safe. I actually have a copy of the report from Popular Mechanics on how good it was. I think I will take that and we'll actually link that up on the YouTube on the site there, and we'll put it up on our Cerberus Facebook site. Um, as you know, the car was designed, as you probably know, this car also was designed to run only on hemp fuel, and it was it can be distilled in an environmentally friendly manner, unlike some other fuels that have to be processed and refined. It was much lighter than its steel counterparts. The prototype weighed just about 2,000 pounds compared to 3,000 pounds for a traditional steel car of the time if you used the same general size of a vehicle. The only steel present in the prototype was the welded frame on which the plastic hemp panels were fitted. That was it. And the lighter weight had a huge impact on fuel efficiency also.
And it was
Which,
stronger, you mentioned.
yes, it was the hemp plastic was 10 times stronger than steel.
Can you imagine how many lives could have been saved had the cars continued to be manufactured with a product that was more resilient to impact, but we threw that away because a couple of financially interested individuals decided to lobby Congress, and I'm sure some money changed hands to make this come off the market. Then you think of all the thousands of people, tens of thousands more, that are victims of the drug war, resulting ultimately from the greed of a few people. Go ahead.
Sure. Some other things that were huge impacts. World War II was a huge impact. Any type of additional prototypes of the vehicle were stopped. They were suspended because of World War II. And after the war, we were in recovery mode and people were in good time mode. The government was giving out homeowners loans, hand over fist, so people could have their little piece of the quote American dream in suburbia. And we had to wait till, another 60, 70 years before manufacturers started looking at, and only select manufacturers, let me put it that way, okay? Because you just can't go into business, right? You say you want to start a business today. Good. What do you want to do? Well, I want to make cars. Yeah, you can't do that. Well, I want to make drugs for company. No, you can't do that. You're forbidden from doing certain things. So don't think that you can go into business now and do research on hemp vehicles. You can't do that. And then, okay, of course, we know that hemp was not the only crop that Henry Ford found out. I don't know what you mentioned before, but corn and soy and cotton and wheat and some other things were also used as biofuels and also could be turned into the panels for vehicles that turned out to be just as strong or stronger than steel. But see, you couldn't impact the U.S. steel industry either back during that time. You couldn't take so much away of the infrastructure development, all of the bridges that were being built and all of the buildings that were being put up that all required tons and tons and tons of steel. The vehicles that were being put out required tons and tons and tons of steel. If you take away that sector of the economy, my God, what are you doing to the U.S. economy during a recovery? Back in the 40s, we were still reeling from FDR's depression.
Wait. He cured. He was the one who got us out of the depression. You know, we heard about that FDR's New Deal policy saved us from the depression, and this is what's so frustrating is the level. There's a lot of noise on here. Someone needs to mute their mic. We were taught, and I remember this in college. I had a professor of history, Robert Dallek. He's a very noted historian who was so convincing in his arguments at the time, because again, other examinations that might lead to a contrary conclusion were never tolerated in his class. In fact, somebody once asked about the John Birch Society when there was a rare open forum. There were 500 in this class, and he proudly huffed and puffed his chest out a little bit and said there's no room in an institution of higher education to discuss the John Birch Society. Opposing opinions were not.
Wait. Where do you discuss it if you can't discuss it in an institution of higher learning?
Not at UCLA. I'll tell you that. So I want to expound upon some of the other history in this article. They explain that the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, look that up in Article 1, Section 8, Jeff, as you're running this up. See if we can find narcotics anywhere under Article 1, Section 8.
It's every single one of the delegated powers. It's every single one of them.
It's necessary and proper. It was an agency of the United States Department of Treasury. It was established in 1932. What a great decade that was, wasn't it? By an act consolidating the functions of the Federal Narcotics Control Board and the Narcotic Division. Andrew Mellon, this gets really cozy here, appointed his niece's husband, Harry J. Anslinger, as the chief of the newly consolidated agency. Anslinger testified before Congress saying marijuana is the most violence-causing drug in the history of mankind. Most marijuana smokers are Negroes, Hispanics, Filipinos, and entertainers. Their satanic music, jazz, and swing result from marijuana usage. This marijuana causes white women to seek sexual relations with Negroes, who, by the way, remember, marijuana causes them to look at the white women twice. He often used propaganda stories run by Hearst's newspapers while lobbying. What an incestuous little relationship we have here. Anslinger ordered the Treasury Department's General Counsel, Herman Oliphant, to secretly begin drafting a bill that would slip easily through both Congress and the court. After 2 years, the FBI proposed the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937. This is what's interesting, because rather than criminalizing, they placed a tax on the sale of cannabis. Anslinger disguised the act as a tax revenue bill and pushed it through the House by introducing it directly to the House Ways and Means Committee. This is the only committee that can introduce a bill to the House without it being debated by other committees, and the chairman happened to be an ally of DuPont, Robert Doughton. It was later seen by another DuPont ally, Prentice Brown, in the Senate Finance Committee, where it was stamped into law. The same year, DuPont patented a new fabric called nylon, which Andrew Mellon was also heavily invested in. Now, nylon, you would think, would be competing with hemp had hemp been continued to allow to be grown. The American Medical Association opposed the act because the tax punished physicians prescribing cannabis, retail pharmacists selling cannabis, medical cannabis cultivation. They claimed the bill had been prepared in secret without giving proper time to prepare the opposition. Hello, much like the Affordable Care Act, we got to pass a bill to see what's in it. They have not changed their evil ways. Anyway, and many were completely unaware that the bill was about hemp because the word marijuana had been used in a song before that instance. The AMA also argued against the FBN's claim that marijuana is an addictive, violent drug that carries a threat of overdosing. Nevertheless, the act was passed, and Samuel Caldwell and Moses Baca were the first official convicted marijuana criminals for dealing and possession not long after. Baca got off within 18 months compared to Caldwell, who was sentenced 4 years hard labor in Leavenworth Penitentiary. While the act itself did not criminalize possession or use of cannabis, it included penalties of up to $2,000 and 5 years in jail for the violators. In 1967, President Johnson commented on the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937. The act raises an insignificant amount of revenue and exposes an insignificant number of marijuana transactions to public view. Since only a handful of people are registered under the act, it has become, in effect, solely a criminal law, imposing sanctions upon people who sell, acquire, and possess marijuana. Subsequently, the part of the act was ruled unconstitutional in the 1969 case of Leary versus the United States because it violated the Fifth Amendment by forcing people to incriminate themselves to obtain the tax stamp. Congress was not happy about the rule, and as a result, passed the Controlled Substances Act of the Comprehensive Drug Abuse Prevention and Control Act of 1970. Let me remind you, according to the Constitution as ratified, there are 3 crimes over which the federal government has jurisdiction: piracy on the high seas, counterfeiting, and treason. There is no constitutional authority to this behavior. I refer to my article from the 10th Amendment Center, Parchment and Plants, What Prohibition Can Teach Us About the Drug War. When it came to regulating alcohol, the Constitution was amended. That amendment was subsequently repealed. We have no constitutional amendment granting the general government authority to regulate substances, controlled or otherwise. Fun?
My goodness, Suzanne, that is just terrible, terrible news. But can I compound on how terrible that is?
Please.
Because, as you said, yes, I know a little bit about this subject. I did a lot of research into this, and I want you to know, folks, that as of 2018, the pro-cannabis lobby in D.C. spends about $1.5 million a year. Now, on the other hand, you can think of it like this. The police unions, the for-profit prisons, the prison guard union, Big Pharma, alcohol companies combined to spend about $45 million in lobbying against legalization of hemp. You have psychoactive cannabis and you have non-psychoactive cannabis. People don't know that there's like 80 different variants of cannabinoids. CBD, which is hemp extract, can be derived from both psychoactive and non-psychoactive cannabis. It is the fastest growing application of hemp. It holds huge medical potential. It's been used with epilepsy, chronic pain, inflammation, and cancer as cures. You have hemp foods, you have hemp body care. Hemp oil contains a superior ratio of what? Fatty acids and vitamin E and key amino acids. Guess what that does to your skin? Hemp clothes, the fabric. I'm just thinking through a list of things. The clothing itself is more durable, more sustainable than cotton. There are so many benefits to doing this right. We really have no reason to continue to maintain the status quo, other than I'm going to throw a question out here and let's see who gets the answer right. Okay, in the United States, since 1971, what is the only organization that holds a patent for cannabis, the cannabis's medical benefits? Anybody?
Well, I know it's a pharmaceutical company. I don't know which one. And I believe that having access to the patented version of the synthetic cannabis is going to cost somebody $32,000 a year.
Well, this organization happens to be the U.S. government.
No.
It's U.S. patent 6630507.
Should be patent 666.
It's and it's because it's related to antioxidants and neuroprotectants. So what happens with that? Well, the US government legalizes synthetic cannabis in 85.
So if there is no medicinal use for cannabis in its natural form, let's say, and that's part of what Schedule 1 is. Let's go through what Schedule 1 really means. If
I just want to jump in here.
Yeah.
Michael says hemp beer is pretty good too. So
I've heard that there's some cannabis infused beers. I don't care for beer, too many carbs, but but according to the 21 United States Code, Section 811, it's a Schedule 1 drug, meaning it has a high potential for abuse. It has no accepted medical benefit, and it cannot be considered safe. So that raises the question, why in the world would the United States government hold a patent for such a clearly dangerous substance?
Well, let's talk about the other Schedule 1 drugs then. Heroin, LSD,
methamphetamine,
ecstasy, peyote. These are Schedule 1. Cocaine methamphetamine is a Schedule 2 drug.
Is it really?
Yeah, it's not a Schedule 1. Cocaine, methamphetamine, methadone, Oxycontin, fentanyl, things like that. Ritalin, they're all Schedule 2 drugs. Oh, yeah. Sister, you're rolling that bowling ball right up my alley right now. This is
well, if you think about it, I can see why they would be Schedule 2, because Schedule 1 has to say they have no medicinal effects. And if you look at the Ritalin and the other drugs they use to, quote, treat school children, they have the same effect on the brain as cocaine and methamphetamine. And that we covered in our discussion with Dr. Marianne Block from the Block Center. That was one of our more popular shows, is these kids. And you mentioned when we were talking about the issues with transgenderism, by the way, we just start cutting and chopping before we look for any underlying issues, which is precisely what happens to these kids. Rather than seeing if there's a vitamin deficiency or any underlying medical conditions such as allergies, the doctors just prescribe these kids these powerful medications, and then compound that by treating the symptoms, the side effects, with other psychotropic drugs. And then these children are being medicated with a concoction, a cocktail of drugs that have never even been tested together, many of which are black labeled for children.
It's unbelievable. You know, the old, and I'll say it at the risk of being beaten over the head with the proverbial judges, what do they call that, mallet thing?
Yeah, the gavel.
Judges gavel. Yeah, I have mine here from when I was a committee chairman over in our homeowners association. Measure twice, cut once.
Yeah.
Measure twice, cut once. Folks, it's pretty simple. I mean, you think about it. Do you really want to cut parts off your kids if there is another reasonable, and I guess it's hard for parents to say, oh my gosh, my child has a chemical imbalance. My child might have some type of mental disorder. This is worse than having, no, it's not. I'd much rather deal with that.
What happens later on?
Deal with
in life,
well, they kill themselves.
Realize, yeah, exactly. But this article here, it says also the Comprehensive Act of the Controlled Substances required the pharmaceutical industry to maintain physical security and strict records for keeping certain types of drugs, classifying them again into 5 different schedules. And we just explained that. So we have to ask ourselves something, the article prods, why would the pharmaceutical company industry, I beg your pardon, and the same companies who in the early 1900s produced hemp medicine for decades make this claim that it is so dangerous? As we know, you cannot patent the plant or naturally occurring compounds in the plant. For this reason, there was no interest by the major pharmaceutical companies to support further research or development. There was simply no money in it for them. As a matter of fact, legalization would be detrimental to their business, similar to the situation facing paper and fabric industries. Again, if people could just achieve the benefits of this drug themselves, these people would stand to lose a lot of money. So at one point, yeah, go ahead.
So let's think about this for a second here, okay? Marinol, which is the synthetic marijuana, is a Schedule 3 drug. Now, why is a synthetic cannabis a Schedule 3 and cannabis itself a Schedule 1? Marinol only comes in with THC. So it is the psychoactive type of cannabis. It comes in a couple different dosage levels. It's legal. It's exceedingly pricey. The side effects are nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, insomnia, anxiety. Cannabis, the side effect is lead to lack of motivation. Excessive use can lead to memory impairment. Mild to moderate use of regular cannabis has temporary memory impairment. And of course, lung problems in the long term. Over 30 years of use, it's been shown it takes cannabis to have an effect on the lungs. So the bottom line, well, the bottom line is Marinol brought in more than 100 million in annual sales for AbbVie Incorporated, one of the big pharma organizations. That's why you have it being synthetically made in America. That's why it's still illegal in America. We have spent more than $3 billion to enforce cannabis prohibition. 45% of all of the drug arrests from 2014 to 2017 were related to cannabis. Well, that means over 700,000 arrests every year. That's one arrest, what, every minute? No, no, more than that. 700,000, about every 40 seconds. Somebody's arrested for a non-violent possession charge of marijuana. I don't know what else to tell you on this. It's just mind-boggling how a few people can control and manipulate the lives of so many people for such an extensive period, even after these big money guys are gone. They're still controlling and manipulating our lives.
You know, they set these policies into effect that thank you for all the all the propaganda. You have so many people against this when they really don't even realize that this whole thing came about because this plant was going to interfere with the monetary interest of a few individuals. And as this article says, that the facts are right in front of us, that the pharmaceuticals, big business. Legalizing cannabis would mean losing hundreds of billions of dollars to a single naturally occurring plant that anyone could grow in their backyard. The same goes for hundreds of businesses in the paper and fabric industries that would lose profits to hemp substitutes. What they're really telling us is it is more important to lock people up than to have certain interests that lobby Washington, D.C. lose some of their money. It's all about money, the article says, and keeping the system chugging. This is why stories of an 8-month-old child being cured of brain cancer from cannabis oil will never make headline news. The only thing we can do, here's what the article suggests, is to work together as a community to spread these stories ourselves. In an age where we are more connected than ever before, it's up to us to control the national discussion and take the power out of the hands of the large corporations and the biased media. Word of mouth is the most powerful tool we possess to fight this uphill battle against marijuana prohibition. I tell you what, I think if Donald Trump was smart, he would push hard to decriminalize marijuana, and he should push hard to decriminalize it immediately. That would get, not that it makes that big of a difference, but that would get him, I believe, reelected.
I think you got something there. I really do. You have so many people that, how many states did you say now? 38?
33 and excuse me, and Washington, D.C. I think our voices are being affected by all this cold weather, so excuse the coughing. But
yeah, sorry. Yeah, it's very, very dry in the house. I even went over and turned on the humidifier. I have one of those things, diffusers, that I put in my super duper. I have, what is this here? Tea tree and peppermint I put in. And I have the best smelling office in the world, let me tell you. When we broadcast from here, folks, we're broadcasting with a good announcer deep voice.
Kamala Harris is campaigning on a platform of decriminalizing marijuana. Never mind when she was in California as the AG, she was prosecuting its use. But now that she is going to be running, and this is what the Republicans need to do. I really do believe that this is going to be a crucial issue.
Political expediency is probably the best way to look at this now.
Yeah.
Because
we're tired of being locked in cages. We should be treated like adults. And then stop also this ridiculous, oh, well, if you're using medicinal or otherwise using marijuana, you can't have firearms. This 4473 ATF form, when you seek to purchase a firearm, will say, even if you are using marijuana in a state where it is completely legal, you cannot purchase a firearm. Now, this ties also into, believe it or not, people, it might seem like we're wandering and just have absolutely no.
Hold on. I really want to get in here. Okay. This whole thing is really so disingenuous to most of these people.
Yeah.
Trump and Feinstein and every one of those megalomaniacs, and the majority of the people out there that are listening or are in society that are against cannabis being legalized are absolutely 100% happy with the drug of their choice, alcohol or tobacco or whatever it is. All these legal drugs that they're good with, but hey, you want that cannabis? No way. That's evil.
Yeah, and this is a conservative.
Be honest. Don't be so hypocritical. If you're going to be good with one drug, alcohol, just let everyone do what they want. And here's the thing. It's personal responsibility. If you want to ruin your life with alcohol, and you'll ruin it faster with that than marijuana. If you want to ruin your life with alcohol, that's fine. But don't come to me asking for me to pay for your bad result. Same with marijuana, same with heroin. If you legalize it, make them responsible for their own lives. And don't come to me asking for me to fork over the cash. Well, they're not asking. They're demanding. They're sending guys with guns to steal my money so that they can take care of these people.
Well, no. And that was one of the justifications I remember when I lived in California and the fight out there for the Affordable Care Act, which is neither affordable nor very caring, was, well, these drug addicts aren't getting the treatment they need. I tell you what, if you make these bad decisions and you find yourself in trouble, I think it's a better solution for society if we decriminalize these drugs and actually make people responsible for their own decisions. But again, we don't like to do that. We want to forgive student loans. We want to forgive debt. We want to bail out companies that make bad decisions because they're too big to fail. The problem is, and the thing is also, the democratic socialists are complaining about capitalism. We don't have capitalism. Yes, we have some people making profits, but try and run a business, as you mentioned earlier, Greg, without government interference. Good luck with that. For crying out loud, a kid was just selling hot cocoa and the police called the neighbors. So we've got this desire to control aspects, other people in our community, whether or not it comes from your neighbor or all the way to the top with big government. We've got to instill in people this desire to be self-sufficient, to be responsible for your decisions, choose wisely or pay the price. Doesn't mean we're going to put you in a cage, but you know what? Maybe if you're high on meth all the time, you're not going to find a family that wants to be with you, and you're going to have to suffer the consequences. We hear these stories. Well, drug addiction, it affects everybody in the community, affects people's children. They need help. You know what? Let these people sink or swim, and then we'll see how many people choose to live off of methamphetamine.
People decide to control other people's lives without controlling their own.
Yes.
And this is a big problem that we face. This is not your politicians type of a problem, because they won't address something like this. We have an undue amount of interest in our neighbors. We'll turn our neighbors in. We'll do everything behind their back. We'll talk on the internet about them. We'll take out, I see people take out these pseudo profiles. You call it a false profile, I guess, in non-industry standard term. They take out a false profile and they'll say things about their neighbors, and nobody knows who this person is. And all this discord and discontent, it's being fostered through social media. Social media is not bringing people together like you would think something like this should. I believe that how many people out there know who the hell their neighbors are? I mean, realistically, who are your neighbors? Do you talk to them? Do you have community events in your community? I know we do over here, because I'm the one that makes it happen. We go out and we set off fireworks together, and we have summertime. We get all people together here, and we have a big, what do you call this? A cul-de-sac. And we get folks together. We did this over when we lived on the other side of the People's Democratic Republic of Northern Virginia. We did it over there too. But who are your neighbors? Do you even know? No, but you're willing to turn them in at the drop of a hat.
Yeah, and this disconnect also really makes people more reliant on government in the event that there is trouble in the community. People haven't come together.
This is part of the system.
Yeah.
This is part of suburbia. This is part of how the highway systems take us far away from our communities. That's how you destroy the community. This is not something that, I mean, I'm sure a certain amount of this has happened by chance, but I would say that the rest of it's happened by design to take people and break the community model so they would become more dependent on government. And if it wasn't designed to happen that way, it's naturally happening that way. I'm not a conspiracy guy, so I can't tell you if it was designed on purpose to tear communities apart, but that's what's happening. That's what's happening. I live on the outskirts of the city of Manassas. City of Manassas has just a few thousand people in it. It's not a huge place. But I can walk downtown, and every once in a while, I'll see somebody I know. I can walk around my neighborhood here, and I know everybody that's on the 3 streets here that are in our neighborhood. About 20 families altogether. And guess what? We all know each other, and we're all aware for each other. That's what builds a good community. You talk to your neighbors, you do stuff with them. They're part of your family. Most people, when I lived in New York City, I didn't even know the guy who lived down the hallway from me in the same apartment building, let alone the people on a different floor. I mean, come on, really? Are we really breaking up that badly? Are we that far gone that we have to go to government for every single thing? Because that's what it looks like to me.
And when we know that we can just call the government in if we have a squabble with our neighbor. It takes away the desire to communicate with them and work together as well. I did come across an article I want to share out of Newsweek that is related to maybe the changing political view of marijuana. And say what you want about She Guevara, but I have to say I agree with her on this one. Marijuana prohibition hit Black and Latino people the hardest, and they should profit from legalization first. Now, I would just like to see the general government get out of this altogether. For instance, I believe it was Chuck Schumer and Bernie Sanders were saying, well, we think that we should decriminalize it. I'm thinking, great, fantastic. You know, a squirrel and a blind nut. I agree with them. And then we're going to help women and minorities set up dispensaries. You know, decriminalization does not mean they're going to mind their own business. But here's what she had to say about what she calls the racial injustice. And again, I don't believe in the identity politics, but you can't deny the fact that certain people in our community have been hit harder than others. And by the way, you can't just say we're doing this to protect Americans' health when you allow cigarettes to be legal. But again, look who's behind this legality. It is the tobacco companies that are paying the general government. But by the way, if I believe that drugs should be decriminalized, I don't think tobacco should be regulated either. So
watch what you're thinking, because the mind police are all over you right now.
Oh, they have been. That's why I keep ending up in Facebook penitentiary. I think I've got about 25 more days or 24 more days of hard time to serve. But she serves on, this is scary. Why is she on the Financial Services Committee? She was saying she couldn't even afford a place to live in DC. She made her comments during a Wednesday subcommittee hearing on the subject of banking service for America's burgeoning cannabis industry, where it's growing rapidly as legalization spreads to more states. She's a member of the Democratic Socialists of America and asked if the marijuana industry was compounding with the racial wealth gap right now by allowing wealthy white-dominated companies, including those that profited from incorporation, to gain early advantage over others. You know, that being said, I do think, and San Francisco is making headway in this as well as expunging the records. Other areas are clearing the records of those that have been criminally convicted of marijuana. And I just think it's silly that we put people in cages over something like this. So essentially, she says, is the industry representative of the communities that have historically borne the greatest brunt of injustice based on the prohibition of marijuana? And again, this goes back to what we said earlier. Who were the targets that were used in the propaganda making this illegal in the first place? That's all I wanted to say about that.
Yeah. You know,
go ahead.
Okay, Suzanne, one of the way the government is going to keep their foot in the door on all of this stuff is a law that was passed, and it may sound, like that's a good idea. Whenever they declared that to diagnose or treat a disease, okay, you have to be a doctor. Now, how does the government stick its foot all over the place on this stuff? They declared drug addiction a disease.
Right.
Now, yes. So you see where that comes in. So let's say you figured out a way to help people that want to get off drugs. If you're not a doctor and you start giving them advice like, you know, this herbal tea will really help you with your withdrawals, this will really help, you can actually be prosecuted for practicing medicine without a license. So even if you were to legalize stuff, you still have that little pry bar that the government is going to use to get in there.
Yeah, I'm glad I'm so
perfect example of that is that Amish guy that was selling those products that's in prison today.
Sam Girod. And I know many people that are selling their own homegrown tinctures and herbal remedies using the exact same labeling as Sam Gurod. And what happened was somebody complained, or so they said, that he made certain claims. You can go to Amazon, or you see these claims all the time that there are medicinal benefits to using these tinctures. Well, they haven't been approved by the FDA. Again, no constitutional authority for the FDA. When law enforcement, including the local SO who stood by and let this guy be violated, they did not want cameras on operating on the facility. Well, he was charged with now interfering with federal officers when they protested the presence on the farm. So we have members of an unconstitutional government organization coming on to somebody's private property. The local law enforcement, the sheriff, stood by, did nothing, just like they did in Angel Raish's case in California when the DEA came in, took her legal medical marijuana pursuant to Prop 215 and did nothing. Scalia cited the constitutional authority once again, not by constitutional delegation of power, but the Controlled Substances Act. So here we have once again the government asserting its power, saying it's constitutional by using an unconstitutional federal act. And, you know, we see this time and time again. So Sam Gurod is still in jail. I don't feel any safer knowing this man is behind bars. In fact, I don't feel safe. I don't feel free knowing any time I get into the crosshairs of these people that they could come and kill you. Look what happened in Houston. Let's turn our attention to that. I've been meaning to get to this for over a week now. We had a no-knock raid and 4 police officers were shot in Houston. What's really scary are the comments of one of the members of the police department directed at the critics of their behavior. But just a reminder, because we had the false lynching claim, which seemed to kidnap headlines, where an unknown actor became famous because of this fake claim. In Houston, Texas, 4 officers were shot during a raid on a suspected heroin dealer's home. Again, the war on drugs is what's causing these deaths. Luckily, the officers are all expected to survive. Never mind the man and the woman that lived in the home, as well as their dog, who did its job and attacked people who kicked down their door and came in, were shot and killed during the raid. A dozen SWAT team members with Houston's narcotics department, along with 6 other patrol officers, went to the home to serve a search warrant. The police approached the door. The suspects opened fire and 4 officers were shot. Now, in another story here from ABC News, because I don't want, this account is again from the Free Thought Project, but I'm going to go to a traditional mainstream media source here so people don't think I'm finding these esoteric, conspiracy theory sites here to get our news. Donald Trump called upon a stage to express pride in the Houston Police Department within less than 48 hours after this incident. They allegedly lied. The Houston Police Department lied to get a no-knock warrant for a drug house raid that left a couple dead and 4 officers shot. What a job you've done. I'm proud of you, Trump told Acevedo. And that was a police officer, the police chief there that he was praising. I'm so proud of you. Wednesday, he said, the Mayor Cities Chiefs Association. I like these people. I feel very safe with these people. How stupid is that? I guess the people that were shot didn't feel really safe. And he says that during the news conference, Acevedo noted a dramatic contrast between Trump's praise for his department and an investigation into the troubling actions of one veteran narcotics officer. Now, we just had a raid out here in Utah with one of the co-owners of the Utah Gun Exchange. Just like we see here, a warrant predicated on an anonymous tip here, or I think a confidential informant. He said, let's see, the officer that is suspected of wrongdoing is Gerald Goins, 54 years old. He was one of the 4 drug team members shot in January when they raided the house. claimed a confidential informant had made 2 purchases of black tar heroin. But an affidavit filed in the courthouse by Houston Internal Affairs detectives investigating the raid indicates the CI, he said, conducted the drug buys on his instructions, claim he never even went to the house. Regardless of whether we had reason or probable cause to engage in an investigation or even to get a warrant, what the affidavit will show you is that thus far it appears that there are some material untruths or lies in that affidavit, and that's a problem. Killed in the raid were the homeowners, Dennis Tuttle, 59, and his 58-year-old wife, Regina Nicholas. Armed with a search warrant, 9 agents backed up by 6 patrol officers surrounded the home just before 5 p.m. after Goins, who again is the lead investigator, broke open the front door. A 33-year-old officer armed with a shotgun entered the residence and was immediately attacked by a pit bull. The dog did its job. The officer killed the dog. One of the suspects, Tuttle, charged from the back of the house, firing a .357 caliber Magnum revolver, hitting the officer in the shoulder. He said Nicholas was shot and killed when she tried to grab the wounded officer's shotgun, and that Tuttle was killed by a police officer when shooting 3 other officers, including Goins, who suffered a bullet wound to the neck and remains in the hospital. Police recovered 2 shotguns. Here's the thing. What they were hiding was these people were in plain clothes. If somebody kicks down my door, they're going to get shot. What's really scary here are the words of one of the police officers in response to criticism of their behavior. Jeff, do you have that audio file handy?
Yes, I do. And here's one of the other headlines on that. After innocent couple murder over cops' lies, Houston police found no knock raids. So, here we are, just another one of these raids. And you're going to hear now the Houston Police Officers Union President, Joe Gamaldi.
I want to speak on behalf of the 5,200 brave men and women of the Houston Police Department and the other 800,000 police officers that are working these streets every single day, putting their lives on the line. We are sick and tired of having targets on our back. We are sick and tired of having dirt bags trying to take our lives when all we're trying to do is protect this community and protect our families. Enough is enough. And if you're the ones that are out there spreading the rhetoric that police officers are the enemy, well, just know we've all got your number now. We're going to be keeping track of all of y'all, and we're going to make sure that we hold you accountable every time you stir the pot on our police officers. We've had enough, folks. We're out there doing our jobs every day, putting our lives on the line for our families. Enough is enough.
All right, serfs, you have been warned. Do not criticize the police. Do not publicize or do not criticize public officials conducting their official duties, or the police with all their weaponry and authority are going to track you. And then what? Junk Bond, you shared with me an incident of out-and-out intimidation for pointing out that police officers were parked in a fire zone. Now, if they're concerned about safety, I would think that they wouldn't be parked there. If they're concerned about safety, they're not going to be kicking in people's doors, not knocking, and in plain clothes. Care to elaborate?
Oh, I haven't been threatened from so far away in such a long time. I don't know what to think. My goodness, usually when somebody threatens me or says something against me, they're usually in my face. At least they have enough chutzpah to stand up to my face and tell me that they're going to come after me. I want to remind folks that a similar raid involving 2 of the same officers that were in Houston just the other day nearly killed a baby 6 years ago. So I don't want you to think this happened back in 2013. These guys, it's apparent that it's not necessarily the tactics. just like the two cops that I ran into out here in the People's Democratic Republic of Northern Virginia. They're above the law. They're what do you call that? Sovereign citizens, right? They don't have to obey the laws of any state or anything. If I asked them, if they ever were on traffic duty and if they ever gave a cop a speeding ticket, who was in a police car who was speeding, I think the answer would be 0.0. That's the bottom line. There's one thing about upholding the law, and there's another thing about being a sovereign citizen. And I think that they crossed the line in a lot of situations. Let me just read something I just got sent from one of our mutual friends, Dan Mundy. I'm going to read this. This is it's my government prayer. The government is my shepherd, therefore I need not work. It alloweth me to lie down on a good job. It leadeth me beside the still factories. It destroyeth my initiative. It leadeth me in the path of the parasite for politics' sake. Yea, though I walk for the valley of laziness and deficit spending, I will fear no evil, for the government is with me. It prepareth an economic utopia for me by appropriating the earnings of my grandchildren. It filleth my head with false security. My inefficiency runneth over. Surely government shall care for me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in a fool's paradise forever.
That's ingenious. That's really good.
I told him I'm posting that.
And that ties in, remember, with Che Guevara's pledge with her new Green Deal, that there's going to be an income for even those not willing to work. So someone's prayers have been answered. But getting back to this officer's comments as well, we're going to be keeping track of you. We're going to make sure that we hold you accountable every time you stir the pot on our police officers. So speaking out against the police officers, absent any threat to their well-being, is not a criminal offense. Yet, according to this officer, you're going to be held accountable. So clearly, you're not going to be held accountable in a court of law, but in the court of police officer opinion. What exactly does he mean by that? Are they going to find out who you are on social media? And if you're in the community, maybe if you have kids going to school or a younger son driving, just starting to drive, are they going to pull you over? Are they going to interfere with your life? They're going to come up and say, we've had complaints about noise in your house or complaints about your kids. We want to come in and examine your home. Are they going to get other agencies involved? Are you going to be subject to an anonymous tip for an extreme risk protection order? We're seeing now there are talks about expanding these red flag laws so that almost anybody can report you. We're seeing that people are getting killed when they come to collect your guns. Where do we draw the line with this?
Oh, I'll tell you what, Suzanne, this hearing that guy talk, they must have gotten a copy of Bolivia's Law 1008 because I'll tell you what, they're salivating at it. Article 79 in Bolivia's Law 1008 actually criminalizes defending or justifying a crime. Okay, under Law 1008, anyone publicly defending, okay, for example, the cultivation of coca anywhere in the country, or defending someone accused under Law 1008 is liable to criminal penalties.
So if you're called to testify on behalf of a defendant in a trial, is that in and of itself a crime if you do so?
Well, I guess they'd say that's not public, okay? But let's just say, I think my dad's innocent of the charges. That is a violation of law, of Article 79 of Law 1008. Yes, if he publicly states that. Now, they probably say, well, the courtroom's not public, so there might be a way around that, because I was wondering about all the lawyers that are supposedly defending these guys that could face criminal penalties. But It's
That would mean
how far
defending
away
them is
are we?
illegal, right? That would mean that
Defending
defending
them in
them would be
public
illegal.
is defending them in public is illegal. Yeah, I guess you could, if you wanted to, twist that. Okay, and I guess the guy defending himself, saying I didn't do it, could have another charge thrown on top of all these others. It's
And again, these aren't laws that were created by the elected officials of Bolivia. These were laws that were drafted by our government and imposed upon the citizens of Bolivia. And let me submit to you that we even have our own local laws that are just as draconian imposed upon ourselves. So, maybe we can't, if we have a police officer with impunity saying that now we are going to track you and hold you accountable, you're looking at something very similar. That was really astute of you to pick out. We are out, or to point out, we are out of time. I want to thank everybody on behalf of Jeff Johnson, Greg Junk Bond Carpenter, and our good friend Booger. We are going to be back hopefully tomorrow. This is the Cerberus Radio Network, where we defend liberty and freedom from the flames of tyranny. Thank you for listening.